Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money, millennials, and young at heart. Welcome, world, to yet another episode of Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. I am Ben Carter, co-creator of the show, and I am joined here in Season 5 by my trusty co-host, Mr. Malcolm Ethridge, who is also a licensed financial advisor. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. One quick edit. You left out that this is the award-winning TV show and podcast twice over, as a matter of fact. 2 awards in 2019. So I just want to get that on the record.
You keep doing that until I make it a part of my opening regularly.
Well, you know, if I'm good at anything, it's bragging about myself. So don't you worry. I'll get it in there.
We know that indeed. An interesting update, or not update, but thing that I noticed in the NBA in particular, short shorts are like coming
I noticed
back
that too.
hard. And like
not a huge fan.
The NBA players, it's like a certain length, but then if you get younger, like into the high schools, it's like they're back into like the 1960s with it.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I haven't been in any high school games, so.
I see clips on Instagram.
Got it. I haven't been to any Instagram, so.
Anything, so.
Yeah.
Interesting trend. I think it makes it true. Whatever, like in fashion especially, it just comes right back around. So like in 15 years, we'll be watching basketball players with like really absurdly long shorts again.
So in other sports news really quickly, I'm really glad, I don't know if you even noticed because for whatever reason you and I weren't texting about it, Jason Garrett is finally out of a job. Like, I feel bad about rooting for somebody to be unemployed in America. But at the same time, he's been free riding for like 9.5 years in $1 million job. So I don't feel too bad for him.
He's all right.
Right.
He's got a retirement
He's going
plan.
to do fine.
Right.
But I am so glad that it is finally over and Jason Garrett is finally gone. So in other sports news, I just,
Indeed, with our little tidbits at the beginning of every show. On this episode of Manage Your Damn Money, we are covering the particulars of selling a home and or real estate. We actually have a show for this guest. He goes by the name of Yony Kifle. He's the CEO of Your Team DMV. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But as we do on every show, it is now time for headlines. And I have to read this one in a certain special kind of way.
Okay.
How Prince Harry and Meghan Markle might become financially independent of the royal family.
Oh, okay.
Was that good?
You did it.
I did it. Okay. All right. This is a January 2020 piece on time.com by Megan McCluskey. Questions abound over how Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, will achieve financial independence in the wake of their announcement that they plan to step back as senior members of Britain's royal family. In a statement shared on their official Instagram page, because they're millennials, they do things like that, the Duke and the Duchess of Sussex said that they plan to transition away from their role as senior royals, and they plan to work to become financially independent while continuing to fully support Her Majesty the Queen. So with no real precedent of a working royal stepping back in quite this way, it remains unclear how Harry and Meghan plans will be successful or where their money will come from going forward. However, while senior royals are prohibited from earning any income in any form, as the Sussexes have made clear on their website, they are current members of the British royal family who both hold titles and earn income. So first question about this, Malcolm. What did you think when you heard this whole story about this particular couple in the royal family in London? Obviously, first of all, America has a strange obsession with like the royal family.
Not just America, everybody.
Everybody. Okay, that's fair to say.
Because like when they got married,
it was a deal.
It was a huge thing like that. Like even my mom was watching for the 2-day or whatever spectacle that it was, and like telling me about it, and
it's a strange phenomenon.
I was confused because my mom doesn't do pop culture, and like, so I was so confused.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, people around the world are fascinated by the royal family just in general.
And what did you think when you heard about this, particularly the financial freedom or
I was kind of confused, actually. Like the fact that there is a job to denounce in the first place. Like I was like, and then also I was confused by like, why would you? So like imagine being like 15, 16 years old and all of a sudden you just walk up to your parents and you're like, I'm denouncing my allowance. Like that's essentially what I understand this to be. And I'm confused. Like why wouldn't you have put in some job applications somewhere prior to making this announcement to make sure that you had a decent place to land? Because don't you live in your mom's house or your grandma's house? Like, so how long are you going to be able to live there rent-free while you're no longer relative? Like all these questions, I have questions. But I will say though, I saw on Twitter a clip from, I don't remember what the event was, but it was back in like September, October, where Prince Harry was talking to the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger.
I just saw this.
And he's like, oh, did you know that Meghan does voiceover work? You should hire her. She's great at voiceovers. And he's like, no, I didn't know that. Yeah, we'll have to consider it. And then like there was an announcement like 3 or 4 months later that Meghan Markle is now like doing voiceover work for Disney. And so I was like, well played, sir. Like, I mean, you know, apparently they did know this was coming and they were planning ahead.
Right.
I don't know what voiceover work for Disney pays in comparison to being, you know, house son to the Queen of England.
Right.
But that's a start. I guess.
Well, anyways, the specifics around the whole thing around financial independence, the question is, what funds are they giving up? As senior royals, Harry and Meghan receive funding through the Sovereign Grant, a portion of taxpayer money derived annually from revenue of the Crown estate that goes toward the work of the royal family in support of the Queen.
Oh, it's kind of like the United States.
Something like that.
We're funding a golf course down in Florida right now.
All right. But while Harry and Meghan were granted the titles of Duke and Sussex and Duchess of Sussex on the day of their wedding in May 2018, they didn't start receiving this publicly funded allowance from the Queen until 2019. To become financially independent, the Sussex, that word is so hard. Sussexes have stated that they will release themselves from the Sovereign Grant. In addition to money they get through the Sovereign Grant, Harry and Meghan receive provisions through the Duchy of Cornwall. That amount is 95% of their office's funding. Although Harry and Meghan are prohibited from earning their own incomes as senior royals, their website states that part of the reason they've decided this new working model is because they value the ability to earn a professional income while remaining committed to continuing their charitable endeavors as well as establishing new ones. So it's interesting because I didn't know that as members of the royal family, at least in this case, they got some kind of base income. You could assume that, but it's an interesting thing to see it actually on
I
paper.
didn't know it was taxpayer funded. I thought like the royal family was the royal family because they had all this money.
Because they had it like
I didn't know they were on welfare. Like I'm not impressed anymore. Like all of this is subsidized by the taxpayers. What happened to pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? And like, oh, what is this?
We're gonna get some angry emails to this man.
I feel like I've been had and took and led astray and like
beguiled.
I don't know about beguiled.
Bamboozled?
That's a little strong.
No.
But you know, run amok.
Okay.
I have questions.
You have questions, indeed. Well, the cost of Harry and Meghan's private security detail in the UK is currently covered by the government as mandated by the British Home Office. But if they were to move to Canada, which is a lot of what people are discussing, that they're going to split their time between the UK and North America, I guess that means the States and Canada.
I think Meghan's from Canada, right?
Yeah, I think like her mom lives in Canada. So anyway, that's that. Can you think of any scenario, Malcolm, in the past where someone looks to emancipate themselves from their wealthy roots to go at it alone? Like, can you think of any other?
You know what? At a time, I believe Willow Smith was on the verge of emancipating herself. No, I'm serious.
How old was she? 9?
Like 14 or 13 or something. Like she was on the path to trying to emancipate herself from her parents.
She's like, I can't work under these Fresh Prince conditions. This is ridiculous.
These royalty checks are too small. Or she didn't want to have to go to any more premiere parties from her dad's terrible offshoot movies. Maybe that was it. She was embarrassed being associated with, Wild Wild West. Maybe that's what it was.
Okay, so Willow's one.
That's the only one I can keep up. But full disclosure, I don't keep up very much with what happens in Hollywood. I'm sure there's a million of them.
Right.
And I just, the problems they're complaining about are some very high class problems, so I don't really keep track of it.
So I do have a question for you. I'm gonna ask you to briefly take this seriously.
Okay.
What does this suggest to you, at least this situation, suggest to you about the cost of serving in such a high-profile role?
That's a very good point. I think I will say, in all seriousness, I do feel bad for Meghan Markle and the way she's been treated in the 2 years, whatever, that she's been married to Prince Harry, because it doesn't make any sense, frankly. Like a lot of the stuff she's had to deal with, and so I guess part of the thinking behind it is like if we separate from the royal family, we don't have to put up with a lot of the stuff that goes along with it. And we would rather forego however many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars we would stand to make, or be subsidized, if that means that we have the freedom to appear at what we want to, not appear when we don't want to, all that kind of stuff.
It would be interesting as well to see what the generational difference is in terms of perspective. My instincts tell me millennials and especially Generation Z are like, yeah, free yourself, girl. Like, go on, Harry and Meghan, like, go on ahead. But then, like, the older generation is like, no, that's improper.
You're breaking with tradition.
You're breaking with tradition, all those things. Anyway, an interesting story that, because it talked about financial independence, we thought we'd cover on this show. But I want to remind you can always catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a rating on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show and help us rate in the podcast charts. Also, if you have a question for us or a topic you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And you always catch us on social media. Malcolm, what's your handle?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And mine is @MYDM1, and that's on Instagram and on Twitter. And you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where on this episode, our conversation at hand is the particulars of selling a home and or real estate. One of the biggest milestones in American life is the purchase, maintenance, and enjoyment of a home. We've covered the topic several times from several different angles, but there's one thing we realized recently that we missed, and that's the details, fine print, and unknowns behind selling a house: taxes, agent payments, modifications, and renovations. All these and more come into play when you're looking to sell a home and may have an impact on your bottom line. That's why on this episode of MYDM, we are taking a look at the particulars behind selling, Malcolm, a house. So let's go back. Sometimes we always talk about how shows originate. How did this one come about?
Yeah, easy. I happened to be having a conversation with our guest where he was walking me through kind of just in general, like activity he had been working on his day.
Right.
And I was like, the light bulb moment was we've never covered the housing market from the seller side.
Ever.
Like that's we always give credence to like folks looking to buy their first house. It's
Right.
always the first house too.
Right.
But we never really talk about what you do after you've bought that house, lived in it, all that good stuff.
And
so
you're done with it.
Yeah, so it's time to talk about like that side of it.
Indeed, 100 episodes, never talked about selling a house before. Well, the first article that we pulled for this show, what you need to know before selling your home. This was a December 2016 piece on Forbes.com by Scott Spann. Choosing when to buy or sell a home is one of the most crucial financial planning decisions that will have a lasting impact on your journey to financial independence. For many Americans, home equity remains the single largest asset on the personal net worth statement. One of the first items that Scott brings up, research your local housing market. If you have lived in your current home for at least a couple of years, you most likely have a general idea of housing prices in your neighborhood and local economic conditions. It is still a good idea to do some additional homework and research housing activity in your area. Also, another pointer that he has, set a reasonable asking price.
That word reasonable is so important.
Tell me why.
Taking the emotion out of that part of it. And because, like, for example, where you say research your local housing market, I could say I've done my research, meaning I looked at 20 houses in my neighborhood that were up for sale or that recently sold, and I decided to fix my mind on the top 3. And so now that's my expectation of what I should be able to sell. Well, that's not necessarily reasonable.
Right. And of course, reasonable means pricing your home correctly from the start, which is extremely important. Avoid making emotional decisions or anchoring your listing price to the home's previous value. And a quick question for you, Malcolm. Have you ever ventured into this space in conversations with clients about selling their homes?
Quite frequently.
Okay.
Because a lot of times one thing that we'll get into later in the show with the guests, but the boogeyman is the tax implications of that sale.
That's a big one.
And so it's always the conversation of, should we do this now, or is there some time we should wait? Is there something we could do to keep the IRS from knocking on our door when it's all said and done? So quite frequently this one comes up.
Indeed, indeed. Another pointer that he has, interview real estate professionals and other potential members of your team. Do your homework. If you decide to utilize the service of a real estate agent, it is suggested to interview 2 to 3 potential realtors to make sure you're choosing the best person possible. And then also improve your home's curb appeal. When it comes to buying a home, first impressions have a significant impact. While significant landscaping updates aren't likely to play a major factor in a buyer's decision-making process, it does help to avoid anything that could detract from a positive first impression, like unnecessary lawn chairs, like on the front of the house and stuff like that. So quick question, or not question, but thing that I just realized. I was in a conversation with my mom and my sister recently, somehow about the house we grew up in Pasadena, California. And my parents, I think, bought the house at $125,000 when they bought it, and we lived in it for like maybe 12 to 15, like around 12 years, I think.
Okay.
And now it's like the value of it is over $700,000. And I was like, and it's literally, I saw like the pictures, it's the exact same house. Like, nothing is done that is different from, obviously there's like cosmetic changes in terms of this is fixed, this looks like well painted over and but there's no additional rooms, and it was a 1-bath house. I'm like, how does a 1-bath house have a $700,000 price tag? I was so confused. But what don't people take into account when considering the sale of a home, generally speaking?
Well, like, so the mantra in real estate that everybody knows is location, location, location. But also, like, timing matters too.
Okay.
So like you just said, like, the time span of the house appreciating, obviously I can't see the trend line of how it actually went up, but it probably was like very flat for a really long time. Your parents said, okay, let's go ahead and sell. And then all of a sudden something significant happened in that part of the country that all of a sudden everybody's interest in being there moved, but the timing associated with that wealth creation, that, activity, you don't really have any way necessarily to know for sure that it's coming, but just being able to take advantage of those kind of waves when they happen is part of it.
Absolutely. And we're talking about like the course of 25 years.
Right.
So, it's reasonable to think maybe someone might hold on to that house, but it's also reasonable to think somebody was, moved on. They don't have kids anymore, so that kind of thing. So another little bit from the piece I mentioned earlier, the cost of selling a home could change your decision on whether it's time, as Malcolm said, to sell. Estimate the potential profit or loss before you ever get to the point of reviewing a purchase offer. You should already have evaluated the potential gains or losses within your acceptable price range. The selling price will be reduced by the following items, and I think this is a huge component of whether or not it's time to sell your home. Real estate sales commissions, so that's a huge component, how much you're selling. And when you're selling, you're the person who's paying both the buyer's agent and the seller's agent, if I'm not mistaken. And then fees paid at closing, also titling charges, government recording and transfer charges, also any additional settlement charges, debt obligations related to paying off any existing mortgages, home repairs included in the sales contract, or repair work completed prior to putting your house on the market. So that's a cost as well.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and then preparation work to get your house ready for the market, such as landscaping and painting, and then also cleaning and organizing your house so people don't come in and say, well, this looks like it belongs to Sally and Sue. And then also a big one, Malcolm, you mentioned before, understand the tax laws around selling a home, because that's a huge taxable event and can take a huge bit out of the amount that you stand to make.
In the scenario you just mentioned, right? It's 100. What'd you say? 125,000 versus 750.
Right.
So a significant $625,000 appreciation.
Right.
Imagine if that happened over a shorter span of time, like say 10 years. Like the amount of taxes that you would expect that now all of a sudden we'll have to pay factor into that equation, pretty significantly.
Indeed. And then and the specific kind of tax is called capital gains. Capital gains are based on your home selling price after subtracting any deductible closing cost, selling cost, and your tax basis in the property. Your cost basis on a primary residence is the original purchase price plus any related purchase expenses. Then you also add in the cost of capital improvements and subtract any depreciation and casualty losses or insurance payments. And there are places you can go that have capital gains calculators, which can help you understand what your loss is going to be as a result of the taxes, Malcolm. So talk about, I feel like we haven't hit on this in a while on our show. You were a homeowner in,
North Carolina.
Greensboro, North Carolina. For how long was it, 9 years?
11.
11 years, while during most of that time, except for the time when you were in college, you were renting. When it was time to sell, when you finally arrived at I'm selling, which took a long time because you didn't feel like it was the right moment, what went into your decision to sell when you did?
Well, you left a critical detail out of that whole scenario, which was that I closed on the house in September of 2007, which technically was the worst month to buy a house as it preceded the subsequent housing market.
Right.
And so it's safe to say that I literally bought at the top end of the market. So it wasn't that by choice I was a landlord for 11 years, because believe me, there's so many headaches in between that if given the chance to do it again, I would say hell no.
Right.
But as I just mentioned, timing played a big factor. It was the fact that right now, or this was 2018 that I sold. So at that point, the market was where I could at least break even and not have to bring any money to the table to get out of the house, which it's sad to say, selling a large asset like that, my whole goal was just in all of the costs that you just mentioned, because I did have to do quite a bit of renovation and all that, and then paying the agent and everything else. I just don't want to have to come out of the pocket at the closing table.
How did you feel about that? Because we typically think about real estate as this infinitely appreciating asset that, you're 10 years from now, you're going to sell it for, double what it was worth when you bought it. And you're talking about how you were trying to break even, essentially. What was that experience like, knowing that, you weren't going to make any significant?
Terrible. It was,
especially for a good old capitalist like yourself.
It was, right. So it's the headache of, I've got this debt on a property that I don't even live in.
Right.
Then the tenants that I was having in there, the time lapse in between having the tenant and having the next one was actually, me breaking even at best, potentially losing money on the months that it wasn't rented. So the nightmare of I'm having to put out money to live in DC, which is extremely expensive on its own, but then also paying a mortgage and HOA fees on a property that I don't even get to enjoy because I don't live there is again, terrible.
It was like you had to pick a road and both of them sucked.
Right. It was, but I will say the reason I can say that with a smile on my face is because it did give me a very good education as an investor in real estate. It also gave me a very good education on both sides of the home buying and selling experience. And I would say it's an education you can't pay for, but I can quantify it because I paid for it.
Literally.
But, all in all, I will say, having had the experience of being a landlord, like now I know what I would do differently if presented with that opportunity again.
What was the number one thing, before we go to our next music break, that you feel like you learned through the home selling process that was most important?
Through the home selling process, I would say having a conversation with your realtor about not just the price points at which other houses in the area sell, like when they go to do their comps, but what other people have that you don't have, that are some very simple things that you can do to the house to make it aesthetically pleasing, because people buy with their eyes, not with their brains.
Right.
And so being able to just throw in a couple of those little things that help attract people's eyes and make them more willing to pay a little more, to me, were really key.
A few bells and whistles. We're going to take another music break. And when we come back, we're going to be speaking to Mr. Yony Kifle. He's the CEO of Your DMV Team. And we're going to be talking to him about selling a home and what goes into it. But before we get into that, I want to remind you can catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a review and rating on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. And of course, if you have a question or topic you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And of course, you can always catch us on social media. My handle's @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@Malcolm on Money.
And that's on Instagram and Twitter. And of course, you can catch us on good old Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where today's conversation at hand is the particulars of selling a home and or real estate. And we are joined here at the desk by Mr. Yony Kifle. He is the CEO of and team lead of Your DMV Team. Yony and his team are experts in the DC metro area, working to bring a wealth of knowledge about buying and selling real estate in this area to their clients. Yony, welcome to Manage Your Damn Money.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
It's showtime. Got the lights on me now.
Indeed. Well, real quickly, what do you do at Your DMV Team Realty?
So, we help buyers and sellers, orchestrate the market and kind of guide them through that. Obviously, as a buyer is a little bit different than a seller, and how you go about that, that's a little bit different.
Okay. And what's your day-to-day look like?
Day-to-day is managing my team, sales calls and kind of following up with clients and things of that sort.
Okay. So, we all have a path to pick in terms of our professional work.
Yeah.
What led you to, residential real estate?
Yeah, so I was originally, you guys were talking sports earlier, so that got me kind of excited a little bit. I'm a sports guy, but I was actually, after college, I played ball in college. After that, decided to do the coaching thing at St. Mary's College of Maryland, good old St. Mary's County. Okay. Then kind of got burned out with that, just assistant coaching things.
And basketball is your sport, right?
Basketball, yeah.
Oh, okay.
After that, then I decided to move back in the area and started working in the Department of Education. And that cubicle life was not for me. So I was looking at what, so decided I was always interested in real estate. Looked into the business side of it and whatnot, and kind of just went at it.
Okay, indeed. So when someone comes to you saying they're ready to sell their home, give me a quick synopsis of what that first conversation is like.
Yeah. So you guys were talking about reasonable price, and that's big. Every homeowner thinks their house is worth more than gold, I guess. And so pricing your home is number one.
Okay.
I think that's something that they have to kind of get over. Again, when you're looking at the comps of everything of your neighborhood, you're always going to gravitate towards the highest ones.
What's a comp?
The comps, comparables. So your real estate agent that you talk with, or several, should have a comparables market analysis of what's happened in your area, your community for the past 3 to 6 months, specifically more 3 months. Okay. And based on that, and based on anything that's any upgrades, any improvements in your home that you made, comparing that and coming up with a reasonable or a buyer market value. Market value being what a ready and willing buyer is willing to pay for your home.
Okay. What's the fastest you've seen a house sell?
An hour.
Really?
An hour.
So went on MLS and within an hour.
An hour.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, some of the Northwest communities of DC or areas of DC, or some other ones. If a home, typically in our area, if it's priced right and it's in good condition, it's gonna go pretty quick.
What's the longest you've seen?
Oh man, I've seen homes never sell sometimes, and they have to take it off the market, bring it back.
They always talk about, specifically on like cable television shows that Malcolm can't stand on HGTV, like this house has been on the market for 127 days. Yeah. What is the faux pas around a home being on the market for quote unquote too long? What is that about?
So if you're a buyer, you saw a property that's been on the market a while, what's your first assumption?
I guess something's wrong with it.
Something's wrong with it. And so typically the longer a property's been on the market, you as a buyer have a little more leverage. So you can go in with a lower sales price, or ask for more closing costs, or this and that. So normally that's why it's so important to price the property as accurate as possible, because the first 2 to 3 weeks, it's like the new kid on the block. You're gonna get a lot more attention. So if it passes that, and if it's overpriced, nowadays buyers are savvy, and so they'll know what a home should be worth. So if it's on the market, is overpriced, it's gonna get, it's gonna sit on the market, and then you're just chasing the market.
So you say buyers are savvy, and we do have a lot more tools at our discretion than we probably did 10 years ago even, like through the likes of like Zillow, Redfin, services like that. How reliable would you say services like that actually are versus where somebody's expectation and their thinking really needs to be?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say they're not that reliable. No, but no, there is. So for somebody that's more savvy, that doesn't need hand holding, that doesn't necessarily need somebody there. Sometimes not even on the phone. Sometimes all that is done online through a portal. That might be a benefit for you as a buyer, and as a seller as well. I think we're kind of touching on this. If you're not gonna have somebody normally that's gonna be there, that's going to be representing you. If you choose to go with whether it be the Zillows and the iBuyers and whatnot, then it's going to, you're not necessarily have an agent that's representing you, and you're going to have to kind of rely on your expertise of contract work and all that.
So you mentioned an iBuyer. That's something fairly new, the concept that like you could sell your home directly to an organization, again, like Zillow or Redfin or somebody large like that, without having to interact with another person, so the other person on the other side of that sale. What's the likelihood that I actually get what I would consider a favorable deal, though, if I'm working with a larger institution like that who's got all the leverage, basically?
Exactly. So I think ultimately, too, some of the Zillows, they're trying to create their portfolio now as well, and so that's why they're doing that. So you're going to normally get lower than market value, and again, there's not negotiating and whatnot is not necessarily, rocket science, but, somebody that's trained in doing that and whatnot can kind of usually get you a better deal
they
than
do that
you.
every day.
Yeah, they do that every day, and kind of knowing that, and there's things that, that's what makes a good agent versus a bad agent or best agents and whatnot. So I would say you're not going to get the top dollar, but
Sure.
it might be easier. And if you're more savvy, you can handle that. And that might be the best route for you.
And I have a friend who recently got rid of a home. Well, not rid of. She sold a home in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, whole different.
And
Yeah.
she lives here now.
Yeah.
And she's had the home for like 10 years. So she was looking at doing like an off market sale,
Yeah.
but she ended up doing like a regular one.
Okay.
But it seemed like that would offer a shortcut to ending her relationship with the home, which was, from what I understand, at least a good portion of her motivation.
Yeah.
Because she just didn't want to have a home and a responsibility similar to Malcolm having a house in Greensboro. So anyway, interesting thought there. What goes into, though, how you determine the market value of a home? Like, what are the nuts and bolts of that?
Yeah, so you guys touched on it a little bit. You can, if you've lived in your neighborhood for quite some time, you can kind of see what other properties have sold for. So that itself, again, will tell you kind of where the range would be. But again, you can sit down with real estate agents, and it's a good idea to interview multiple agents, at least 3. And those agents should come there with comparables, the market analysis.
Is it just about what's going on around you? Are there any other factors?
Well, I mean, if your neighbor sold their house for $500,000, then you can at least get that if it's quite similar to yours, and if you've made any improvements, anything that has any justifiable reason why it could sell, then you can up the price range more. So, but the real estate agent should give you more of that, looking at your property based on the improvements, based on the upgrades. If you added a half bathroom, if you added a full bathroom, if you finished the basement, all those things based on that, you can calculate what the market value would be.
What's the reason you say to interview multiple agents, since you guys, I would assume, have access to all the same information?
Yeah, what makes a good lawyer versus not, what's makes a good podcast versus not, it's everything. It's the skill sets, the delivery, it's what, the experience that you've had. So when you are, again, working with a listing agent, it's a little bit different. It requires a little more skill set than just what I would say a buyer's agent. And so not every agent is a listing agent, has the resources for that, or has the skill set, or the knowledge of what the market is. And one thing I will say is there's benefits of just, I can come to your house and you give me a price that's crazy, and if I really wanted the listing and I really didn't care about your selling your home, there's a benefit of getting that contract or getting that listing because I put my sign in the yard, right? So then, even if I have no intention of selling your home or putting any work into selling your home,
makes you look
as
busy.
as buyers are coming to the open house or as buyers are driving by, they're going to call that, and so I could take those buyers and then sell them another house. So it's very important, first and foremost, that person has had experience selling in your area and has sold property, not just listed, but also is somebody that's going to be truthful and really has confidence in their abilities and who they are, and so they'll tell you if you're asking for $550 and everything is sold and for $500, they got to be yes man, yes. You can't be yes man, yes woman. It's got to be somebody that that could give you that information and stand up for that.
Speaking of that specifically, how do you specifically, Yony, deal with clients who are adding a couple $1,000 and maybe $10,000 for that emotional value? What's that conversation like?
It's ultimately, the goal is getting top dollar. And when you price your home over what the market value, like I said, it's just not going to get any looks. Buyers will look at a property and know what other ones have been selling for, and they won't come look at it. And ultimately, if you're not getting bodies in the house, you're not going to let the house sell itself, and it's going to just stay on the market, and ultimately you'll lose money. A lot of people think they want to put a gap to kind of, for negotiation purposes, but it just works. It works the other way.
Oh, interesting.
So shifting gears just a little bit. So we talked in the lead up to this segment about some of the other things that go into selling the home, some things that you should be aware of, like the tax implications and improvements and all those kind of things. What type of work do you do with sellers specifically when it's time to actually account for all of the costs that are going to go into it? And do do that as part of the task of helping them figure out like what number can they ultimately take versus what they've got to walk away from, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And in terms of tax implications and whatnot, we typically have an attorney with the title company that we usually work with, or that can kind of give you more information on that specifically. And so we kind of make sure we put them in that so they have that legal advice. But when you sit down with an agent as well, or you're interviewing, that agent should have a net sheet that takes you from, hey, this is what the sales price is minus expenses. This is what your net proceeds should be. Okay. So that's very important. You want to know what ultimately it's not what you sell it for; it's what you take home. Right. And so that's very important.
Have you ever had a scenario where somebody was like, "I'm ready to sell," and they looked at the cost and said, "Oh, I can't do it"?
Absolutely, because most people are not savvy enough. No, not savvy enough, but they just don't have that information readily available to see what are the costs. Right. And there's a lot of different things that eats away at your profit. And so you got to make sure you're aware of that. So
what are some of those things, like transfer taxes? I know go into it.
So we talked about commissions and whatnot. And the commissions, one of the big ones, it's negotiable. Again, it can go from discount brokers to like full service brokers of between 4 to 6% in our area. Okay, and again, and so you have that. So that's a commission, and then the other settlement costs, recording tax, and whatnot. A good rule of thumb is anything like below 200,000, it's another 1% of the sale. Okay, sales price, and then anything above 200,000 is about 0.5% in terms of all the settlement costs. Now, other costs that may happen, it can happen, but buyers can ask for closing costs. And so if they do ask for the seller as a seller subsidy to help them with their closing costs, it's another expense.
Right.
So again, home inspection items as well sometimes might be expenses that you have, but you can always take care of the home before you list the home, and that way it increases that chance.
It sounds like it's awfully expensive to sell a home.
It can be. Well,
Nobody told me this before I bought mine.
Well,
Wait a minute.
So it's interesting that the way the industry is set up, all of the burden rests on the person selling, not the person buying.
Isn't that ironic? Yeah. Such an American situation there. Anyway, so let me ask you this. Generally speaking, how does a person know when it's time to sell versus waiting for some future moment?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Obviously it depends on, people sometimes they need to sell for various reasons. Right. Sometimes there's not enough space, you're growing, your family's growing, you just, all those different things. So ultimately though, there's seasons in terms of better times to sell, and so there's pros and cons. Typically, a lot of people know that the spring market is kind of the most traffic, and so there's pros and cons in that. When you do sell, you're typically going to have more buyers that are going to be looking at your property, because that's when a lot of buyers are on the market as well. They get their tax returns, they can put that for down payment, all those things. But on the negative side, that means a lot more people are going to sell as well. So that means you have more competition. Okay, and that kind of goes between the spring market, early summer, and whatnot. Winter might be something that most people don't think will be a great time, but it depends on the location. Obviously, there's some markets it doesn't matter. So, but winter, you're typically going to have less buyers on the market, but the ones that are there are going to be more serious. That means they got to be in there. And second, you're not going to have you're going to have less competition.
Okay. So I read recently that there's a such thing as the Black Friday of real estate. That there's a certain time of year, like between Christmas and New Year's. Who would you say that benefits most, if anybody, buyers or sellers?
Because normally during that time, there's less buyers on the market. So a home sits on the market a little bit longer, which then comes to our conversation earlier. A longer home sits on the market, the leverage kind of tilts to the buyer's side.
Right, because they're anxious to get it off.
They got the home on the market. It sucks having to show the property, especially during winter. You got all that.
Indeed. Final question before we wrap up this show. Most people have to sell their current home in order to prepare or finance their next home. What's the process? How does that work when they're in that situation?
Yeah, so there's various options. Obviously, ideally, and again, that sometimes whether it be a buyer's market, seller's market, may factor into that. But ideally, you could buy your home and then sell it, right? But most people financially, they can't hold two mortgages and whatnot. It's a little bit. So there is concurrent sales where you make the purchase of a home contingent on the sale of your current home, and that's the
How
timing.
long
is
does that contingency last?
well, it can work out where you basically sell your home and close on the sale of your home that morning and sign that afternoon. But all the more reason. Now that I would not recommend with iBuyers and things of that sort, because it's a lot of different parties, a lot of different time frames that has to be timing. So it can happen where the same day, the next day. There's also opportunities where you put the home on the market and you find one. You can also ask for a rent back. Basically, when the buyer puts your offer in, you just ask them that after they close on their home, you need a rent back of up to 60, 90 days, where you have time to go and purchase a home.
And
So
you're basically renting that home.
you're
for
renting
that
the
90
home,
days.
so it's calculated based on the holding cost or whatever's negotiated. So you become the landlord, or you become the tenant after the sale.
So they buy your home,
And then
you
they'll
stay
let you,
there
they'll let you stay there
for as long as you need to buy your new home
for a fee. It's always a
Of
fee.
course,
Yeah.
obviously. It is the United States of America. Well, indeed. Well, if people want to learn more about you, your work, or how they can get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I think the best place is our social media. It's at Instagram and Twitter, Your DMV Team. At Facebook, it's Your DMV Team of Keller, KW Realty. And our website, bestdmvhomes.com. Easy enough. So you can reach us there.
Excellent. Well, Yony, thank you for coming on.
Thank you
thanks,
so much,
man. This was
guys.
great.
Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. I want to remind people you can catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. If you have questions for us or a topic you want us to cover, send us your suggestion, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. Of course, you can always catch us on Instagram and Twitter. My handle's @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
At Malcolm on Money.
Of course, you can also catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. Thanks once again to our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for their amazing hospitality. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.